employee's home. John Blowbaum, Chad Benton disagreed with that. And they said, boys, and this was after the second tower got hit. They said, we don't know what's going to happen next. We apparently are at war with somebody. And this will be one of the biggest events in U.S. history. You're darn right these people are going home. And I remember Cece and I were living in our condo in Carter Lake on the water as usual. And I remember sitting there watching what was going on and crying. So I was very happy those people had gone home. One of my best employees ever was a gal named Jeannie Waite. Good enough that I let her go to India for 3 months just because she was so caught up in her religion. And roll forward a couple of years, I was rehiring a salesman named Jeff Lamb. And Jeannie would set the appointments for Jeff. And Jeannie said to me, there is no way I will work with Jeff Lamb. And I said, oh, sounds like you're resigning. She was working out of Phoenix, by the way. Sounds like you're resigning. I'll be on a plane tonight. I'll see you first thing tomorrow. We'll pack up all your CFO stuff and you'll be done. And I did. And I don't feel bad about this to this day, but it was unusual. FEDR, F-E-D-R, Field Economic Development Resources. After CFO Services was up and running, I had the idea to have an online subscription service for it. Norm Lund and I spent a few months putting together a business plan to raise $7 million. I spent $100,000 on getting that business plan together, a big chunk of it being market research and then putting together the dummy website. Well, as fate would have it, the NASDAQ, which is the online web-based company's exchange, crashed right as we were going into the market for that money. I mean, we had no chance. And people who would have been investors told us, oh, we'd be in, but we can't. It looks like this whole web deal is going to collapse. Oh. One of my absolutely favorite business stories. So, if it had worked out, Feeder would have had offices separate from CFO because it would have quickly grown much bigger. I'm at lunch with Sherry Dawson and one other employee, and she asks the question, if Feeder goes, will you work in feeders officers or CFOs? And I said, I would think feeder. And she said, oh, good. I'm kind of tired of working around you. Absolutely one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And so she was integral to our operation at that point. We slowly worked her out over, I don't remember whether it was 3 months or 9 months, had to be 3. And she did get away from me. The reason I know feeder had potential is the biggest I'll be there in a minute. Research publication was Commerce Clearinghouse, and they updated everything you could dream of every week. So Commerce Clearinghouse was massive. A year after I couldn't raise our 7 mil, Commerce Clearinghouse debuted the same thing. Oh, I had never thought of this until recently. When I was in public accounting, I had a practice with 400,000 of billings. And that was toward the top as far as billings go. I've known a couple people who have bragged about the size of their practice, including a former IRS guy who was a dick. And I haven't had the chance to sit in front of him and make the point. My practice was 400. But if you add in CFO services, which was 1,400,000, my 1.8 million would undoubtedly be the biggest practice in Omaha and dwarf yours by over $1 million. Thankfully, I didn't have to say that. Oh, last business-oriented thing. Big Jack, when he died at 96, he must have been 91, 2, 3 when he said this. He said, and this is just part of the conversation, Phil, I always thought you kept me apprised of your business successes to kind of rub my face in it because I treated you so poorly. And I thought, how sad is that? Far from the truth. Medical, and again, this is why this whole thing may be a repeat. Emmanuel, I was in there for 10 days in the psychiatric ward, and I was God when I walked in there. And over the years, everybody says, you mean you thought you were God? Well, recently it occurred to me why I was God, and the next person that says, you mean you thought you were God, I'll look at him quizzically and say, when's the last time you saw God in human form? And of course, the answer is never, which allows me to go, then how can you tell me I wasn't? such a dick. Oh, my sex education, we're into women. From Dad, he sat me down before a date with Pam and he said, "Don't get intimate." That was sex education. My number 2 girlfriend, Dina. Dina had the most beautiful hands and feet I have ever seen. I mean, they are way beyond anybody else. There are hand and foot models for like rings or bracelets or whatever kind of jewelry or you name it. She missed an opportunity not doing that. We found out that we were going to have an Adam by doing what was called an EPT back in those days, early pregnancy test. And when it came out, there was like a little donut in the bottom of it. And I took a picture of the EPT, cut it down, and that was in my wallet for years before it fell apart. My client, future partner Mike May, had developed something called Meadowbrook Mobile Home Park. I had taken $100,000 pay cut to go to work at his telemarketing firm, which is where I was when Mike finished Meadowbrook. Well, I had what I thought was a genius idea. I wanted to connect 4 mobile homes into a big square so we can have a courtyard in the middle of it. I know, lunacy, don't forget bipolar disorder. Believe it or not, Mike said, yeah, I mean, why not? And Sherry was going along with it. Now, I've come to believe Sherry wasn't thrilled with a lot of my ideas and what I was doing. Probably that one too. After 15 years together, Sherry gave me the famous list of 10 things that I sucked at and I needed to change. And 1 year later, I read my list to her and asked her, what haven't I changed? And she literally said, nothing. You changed them all. I pull my list out and I tell her the first thing is, I want you to read the Omaha World Herald today so we can have an intelligent conversation about what's going on around town. Well, she freaking exploded and said, that's totally different than anything I asked you to do. Which I went, what? That's 100 times easier. But I knew well enough. Well, that's the easiest one. No sense going number 2. One of the things on her list, to me, was that the boys treated her like a maid. She did all the cooking. She did all the cleaning up of the dishes, all the vacuuming, all the dusting, all the snow shoveling, all the mowing. And she's bitching about that, and I said, well, I'll fix that. And I went home and talked to you three guys about, guess what? Life's gonna change. You'll think for the worse because you'll have more stuff to do, but it'll be for the better because now you'll know how to do this stuff. Sherry. I don't know if you know who Meg Ryan is. Star of my favorite movie, Sleepless in Seattle, and several other classics. Well, Meg and I were both single at the same time. I'm out with Tom Hupp, who was a semi-friend employee of mine. Tom used to call me Phildo. And conversation turned to Meg getting divorced, and I said, you know, I could get a date with her. And Hupp nearly crapped himself. He was laughing so hard. And I said, wait a minute. It's not like I'm just going to call her up. I have a cousin who's in Hollywood. If he doesn't know her, he knows a person who knows her, maybe two reserved or back. And I firmly believed, and by the way, still believe that could happen. Oh, perhaps my top memory of Fifi. I'm in the hot tub one day when she gets back from work at 5 or 6. And I say, hey, jump in the tub. She proceeds to walk into the tub fully clothed, including her boots. And then we sat there until 6 the next morning when we had to get ready for work and watched the moon make its arc completely around. Quite a memory. Her sister Linny died of pneumonia. And Fifi was up there for like a day. I came up to visit, and I'd never heard pneumonia. And it's basically a death rattle, uninterrupted. I could not take it, so I left. One of the biggest mistakes of my life. You gotta be there to support somebody in that situation. I wasn't. Crappy. Lenny's husband, Bob, Fifi's brother-in-law, died of colon cancer in our Fifi lake house, which had just a wonderful look out onto the lake due to the windows that myself and my dad a little bit put in. Famous Roxy, a couple of things. When I met her, I said, don't get the idea this is going to be a lifelong thing. I'll tell you what you're on is a summer internship. And she thought that was a blast. So she'd tell everybody she knew that she was on a summer internship. Then Reinsch, Roxy, Bry, and I played golf out at Pioneers one morning. We were the first ones to tee off at like 5:30, and they had tees, which is a marker that shows where you're supposed to tee off. They had tees that were so far up, they had to be for like paraplegics. Roxy played those tees, shot 82, beat the other three of us, and beat the best score she'd ever had by 22 strokes. And we didn't have the heart to tell her, you're kind of screwing the system here. So Muhammad Ali died. I decided to fly to Louisville, Kentucky, and go to his memorial service. Well, you picked up the tickets on Wednesday. Service was until Saturday. Cindy and I had been divorced for a long time. Well, not divorced. I had left a long time previous. A month. And I figured, well, I have 3 days to kill here. I'll get on Match, see what happens. I send out 25 messages to the best looking 25 I saw that night. And Lori was in that group and just had the nicest smile. And her profession was working with old folks in old folks' homes. That night, we messaged within the service, which is what you're supposed to do. You don't give out your phone number, your email to somebody you don't know at home. That was first night. Second day, we were comfortable enough. We exchanged phone numbers and texted all day. Third day, we had the infamous 8-hour phone call. Insane. So it appeared we may have a reason to get together. Her driveway at her little house in Fremont flooded all the time. It was old, it was cracked, and so it came together in kind of a V. So I saw that enough times. I went, I think, online, excuse me, and I bought a $20 plastic kayak. Couldn't have been online. Had to be at some store. And I set up the kayak in the water the next time it flooded. Had the pole out in effective mode and called her. And she came out of the house and once again about crapped herself. She considered that one of my best ever. Lori and I had been together for 2 weeks. We were going into Lincoln for some phony reason. We weren't really going for that reason. And on the way I said, hey, we have time for lunch. How about one of my favorite places? There's a Mexican place called El Toro, and you'll love it. So we pull into El Toro, get and walk to our seat, and there's my sister, Shan. Well, Shan wasn't Shan from Lori's perspective. Shan was an old high school friend that I hadn't seen in forever. So we sat down and talked to Shan for 45 minutes. With Roxy having no clue. And why should she? Oh! The odds just had struck. Why should she? What kind of an ass would make this up? So at the end of 45 or so, I say, oh, and by the way, Shan and I don't know each other from high school. This is my eldest sister. And Lori looked at me dumbfounded. She could not believe. We leave, hop in, I think it was driving a truck at that time. And as we're driving back to Omaha, she is just looking at me. And I glance over. She doesn't have a pissed face. She has an unbelieving face. You've certainly seen this one. The second date we had was at the Johnny Carson Theater in Norfolk for the Great American Comedy Festival. And again, second date. First one was at a place in Midtown Crossing. This is number 2. So, when we walk in, Lori says, I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, sure. Run off. She comes out walking toward me. And I do my famous, Lori! Lori! And she's 2 feet. I've always liked that one. Another Lori. This is why that woman is such a bitch. We had so much fun. The first 23 days that she saw me, I wore the same navy blue shorts. And eventually, of course, she figured that out, but kill me. Now, travel stuff. The electronic pointer. I would be filming something or taking a photo of something like that NFL football, and I would say, yeah, it's right over here as the electronic pointer will show. I don't care if some of this isn't funny to you. It's funny to me. ETA. Estimated time of arrival, another thing I'm famous for, another thing I can't believe isn't in an earlier issue. I have an uncanny ability to tell when I'm going to be somewhere. And the boys, because I'll do it out of Breckenridge, Colorado, and I mean, no shit, I'd be seconds to minutes away from perfect. Of course, the boys thought I was cheating, and as we got closer, accelerating and decelerating big time. World Trade Center elevator. I must have been in my early-ish 20s, mid-20s with Sherry, and we went up the World Trade Center elevator, which to me was scary because you felt your stomach just drop. So, no reason to mention it other than things that came later. I was in the Virgin Islands with a client of mine. Oh, how did you get there, Phil? We took a private jet from Omaha to Boca Raton, Florida, refueled, and flew down to the Virgin Islands. I was scuba diving back then, so I scuba dived or dove, and coming toward me was an immense school of some kind of red fish. And so I thought, I'll go straight at him. I go straight at him, and I mean, it was like the parting of the Red Sea. They just opened up a space for me to swim through and then closed back up. Wow. A cool one. 32 minutes off on.